I'm just a I'm a writer. I've written 5 books in almost 4 years. I've got a couple more that are coming out. Just writing came out of a dark time in my life, and I've just been nonstop. And I can you can find my work on Amazon. All 5 of my books are on Amazon. Um, you can reach me on Facebook, LinkedIn. I've got a Substack page where I post, not as much as I used to, but and my email is my first initial and last name at Gmail, and I'm always happy to talk about anything to anyone who would want to listen.
So my first question for you is why did you get involved in book writing?
I gotta say, I've always been an observer. I've always observed people. I've always observed situations. I've been, a curious guy, and I always thought I could write from a young age, but I never actually did. 2022, coming out of COVID, relationship of almost 15 years, 2 kids, fell apart, dark place, um, challenges with my job. And so I did some counseling, and the counselor suggested that I just start keeping a journal. And I was like, yeah, okay, whatever, a journal. Um, Pretty dismissive. Ego gets in the way of a lot of things, right? But I just started writing. I just remembered stories, and I just started writing stories. And then in a short time, my first book came out, 9 short stories. And then I thought, wow, I can actually do this. And so the second book and the third and the fourth, and I've been nonstop. And I gotta say, like, I'm not disciplined, right? I'm all over the place. I'm busy. I've got kids in sports. I've got all kinds of stuff, but I just seem to find time when the mood strikes me. So it's been a bit of a lifesaver for me.
How important was it for you to have that outlet, not only from, let's say, a healing perspective, but let's say an emotional aspect as well?
Oh man, I can't even express how important it was to be able to not only write it, but to publish it and to accomplish something. It was all of a sudden it was like, hey, I'm not a total loser. I'm not worthless. I'm not a quitter. I'm there for my kids. And being able to do the work and feel good about myself, and not accolades from others or anything like that, but just that feeling of accomplishment was huge for me.
I know for me, when I was growing up, I needed an outlet in my life. And one of the things that I struggled with was I felt like I wasn't succeeding in the way that I needed to succeed. And by that, I mean, I had this view that was kind of designed for me by those around me, right? I know we were both Canadians, but if you think of, let's say, the American dream, right? You get a house, you get married, 2.5 kids, dog named Sparky, and everything is fine, right? But then what happens is we get there and we get the house and we think we have the relationship and we think that relationship is going to turn into something and then we think we're going to have the kids and everything. And they're not like, oh, the dream that we're told to have is not solely dependent on us, it depends on someone else as well, right? It's a unison, or in some cases, it could be three, four, five different people. But for me, when I realized I didn't want that dream, I wanted a different version of it. That's when I truly felt free. I no longer had the shackles. For some of the men out there who are trying to obtain that dream because that's all that they know and that's all that they've been striving for, what do you see could be some of the difficulties that they face trying to live up to a standard that maybe they didn't establish for themselves?
That's a great question. Thanks for sharing your story. I think part of the challenge is that, as when we're young, when we grow, when we develop, you know, we are valued for what we do. We're valued for, if we're good in sports, if we're good in school. So there's always that placing value on ourselves. when we get to the point where we want to start to build a life, you know, what often happens is people fall in love, people get together for lots of different reasons, but mostly you fall for the shared values and the p common goals, common foundation. What happens with a lot of men, and this is what my book is about, is when financial responsibility becomes identity. And this touches a little bit about what you talked about with the 2.5 dogs and the kid, or 2.5 kids and the dog. And that is that, you know, in time, when things are going well, everything's great. But life is pressure. Life is responsibility. And in no way, and responsibility is important. But what happens is, and this is what I talk about in the book, is that we start to measure ourselves, measure our self-worth by the responsibility that we carry. And so what happens is, sometimes we're crunching numbers. We got to pay bills. We need to take a trip. The kids need this. Kids need that. We got payments. We got this. We got all kinds of responsibilities. And a lot of men carry that silent burden. And we don't share that, because if we share our fears, we we don't want to be seen as weak. We don't want to be seen as vulnerable, and we don't want to be seen as not being able to provide. And so what happens is there's this fracture over time. It's slow. It's like a slow erosion. And over time in a relationship, and I experienced this, I saw my father go through this. I know a lot of guys who've gone through this, where all of a sudden we're measured. We measure ourselves by what we can provide, not who we are, not the music lover or the athlete or the golfer. No, I don't play golf, but like the whatever, whatever it was that made you a complete person. And so what happens is that we become short-tempered. We don't want to express things, so we keep it bottled up inside. And there's this like a pressure valve. And if we don't release that pressure valve, what happens? We start becoming disconnected from our families, disconnected from our kids. We're not present. We may be angry. We may be short-tempered. And so what I'm trying to do with the book is to say, look, you need to release the valve, because by protecting the people from your fears that you love, that you're providing for, you're actually creating greater distance, because all of the pressure is manifesting into things that are pushing your loved ones further away. So the book sort of, and I don't offer any quick fixes. There's nothing like that. What I try to do is to shift the mindset a little bit. And you found a path that works for you. Every man, while we're going to have similarities, every provider, we're going to have shared experiences. It's about finding the path that works for you. You don't have to break down and say, "Oh, I can't deal with this." You don't have to have a complete breakdown. But if you learn to release the pressure valve a little bit, share that things maybe aren't going right, tough month, tough week, tough year, because if you can express that, you can release some of the pressure. Maybe you're less angry. Maybe you're more connected. Spend time with your kids. Balance. Find the things that you love to do that make you the person you are, not the person defined by your responsibility. That's really what I'm trying to say in the book.
You mentioned men when it comes to their identity, who and they associate with their value, sorry, what they can provide, what they can offer. Is that then difficult for some men to discover their value outside of what they can give to others, but maybe what they can give to themselves?
I think so, definitely. I mean, we talked about growing up, and we talked about how we sort of fall into these roles, and sometimes like it's learned behavior, right? You're the provider, you're the protector, and those are all important. Those are valuable things. And if someone chooses that path of a family and providing for a family, that's a beautiful thing. Responsibility is a beautiful thing. We all need it. Everyone, regardless of whether you're a provider or not, responsibility is an important thing. But I think what happens is that when we disconnect from ourselves, it's like, how many times have you been in a relationship, or you've had a friendship where at first, you're there's all these great things about the person that you're hanging with, and that's what attracted you to them. All these cool things, maybe they're outgoing, they have hobbies, they have interests, and it's all cool. It's all really interesting. But what happens over time is people fall into these roles and they lose that part of themselves. And I really think that when you lose that part of yourself, you become this sort of two-dimensional person, weighing your self-worth on on what you can do and provide rather than who you are. And that disconnect, that fracture, I think is where a lot of relationships go south. Because all of a sudden, man, um, to, I don't want to be presumptuous, but Terrain used to do this and he used to do that and he used to be all interested in all these things, and now he just comes home. He has a whiskey, he has a cigar, and he sits there and he just wants to be left alone. He doesn't engage with the family. Well, the question really is, what's going on with Terrain in his head, in his life, that's causing him to need to disconnect, right? And so that's kind of where I where I try to go with this book. It's like we are all multidimensional. We are all multifaceted. We are not defined by one simple thing. You can't slap a label on any person, you know. And so I try to sort of get that in the book and try to offer a way out, you know.
I look at my upbringing when I started to become successful in life. I started to get people around me who made me feel good. They made me feel important. But then what I realized, to your point, was that they were around because of the success. Once I became successful in something else and less successful in what that brought them around me, they didn't want to be around me anymore. I didn't lose value in my when I look in the mirror, I'm still valuable, right? If so, if anything, I'm more valuable because I'm finding success in different areas. But because the people at that time thought that this is my definition of success, and because I wasn't focusing on it, they kind of pushed me to the side. And that wasn't a good feeling because then I was like, oh, maybe I'm not as successful as I am because I'm making this mistake. But I made five good things, but that one mistake caused other people to leave me. What are your thoughts on people who they have the community, but the community only is around them as long as they perform to what the community values?
Terrain, I had this very similar conversation with my son. Um, he's 16. He's an athlete, um, and what you describe is so critical because you know you were in a situation with people who maybe didn't have the same growth mindset as you did, right? And rather than rather than support you, because a real friend, a person that really loves you, a person that really cares about you, is going to be happy for your success. It's going to say, that's amazing, way to go, bud, keep her going, right? Or whatever, you know but and that's what a true friend does. And I said that to my son. I said, like, your true friends are going to want the best for you, and you're going to want the best for your true friends. And if there are people in your life that are discouraged, just trying to discourage you, or not happy for your success, they're not your real friends. And that's the conver. It's funny. I just had this conversation with him because he was struggling with a friend who always seemed to be getting him in trouble. And I just thought, what's the best? What's the best for you? Because Terrain, your success is based on your belief and yourself. And wherever that came from, that's inside of you. And so you will find there will always be, and I'm sure you have a lot of great people in your life that are happy for you and you're happy for them. And you may not be on the same path, the same trajectory, but you're always there saying, good job, way to go, sharing stories and helping each other along the journey. So, what you just described is I think is happens to a lot of people. And I think it's really important to remember, like I said to my son, you know, people, the people who want the best for you, those are your friends.
When you're speaking to your son, and maybe you've gone through this as well as I know me and many others, how can we then identify who is going to be there along the journey and maybe who is holding us back?
That is such a good question. So with my son, like he had this one friend, and I suspected that the kid didn't have my son's best interest. I didn't say anything. Um, I may have said, are you sure you want to do this? Are you sure you want to go there? But I think we can see, look, if if somebody's pulling you along a plate, your instincts, like, when you have we fail to trust our instincts, my instinct when something's not right, my gut kicks in and I follow it. And I think most people have the instinct, but I think it could be as simple as like if you're not into something, if something maybe you know goes against your values or your sensibilities, and you're constantly being pushed in a direction that you're not comfortable with, I think those are the signs, right? Like with my son's friend got him into some serious trouble. And it wasn't the first time that this kid had gotten other people into serious trouble. And so that's when we had the talk, right? Um, but yeah, it's tough, like it's hard to have to be on guard all the time. You want to be able to just trust your friends. But if your gut tells you something, that's kind of what I tell my son and what I sort of live by. How can you tell? Like when it's happened to you, what were the signs that you saw?
The signs that I saw was I didn't feel safe. And by safe is that I always felt that I had to look around and make sure that there's no evil or nothing happening because the people I was around at that time in my 20s, their behaviors was destructive and they would put us in difficult situations. So an example would be we would go out that somewhere, and I think a lot of men have this, maybe some women as well, where there's that one friend that it doesn't matter where you go, you can bring them to church, they're going to create chaos or drama, right? Like it's just
Absolutely.
it, right? You could bring them to the altar, you could bring them to a religious building, you know that they're going to create something. And the problem that I faced when it came identifying that was I was judging that person and their relationship by how long I knew them and not the quality of the relationship. And I find sometimes as we get older, we make less friends. Definitely for men, women are a lot better at it because they're better at maintaining friendships. And we're like, well, I thought my life was going to be like Facebook and I was going to have 10,000, 20,000 friends, right? We all thought that in high school because we're just adding everyone at that point in our lives and on social media. But now that we're a little bit older, we're, a little bit gray in our beard and gray in our hair, we're like, okay, if I can have a good solid three, four, five friends, the friend that gives me advice, the friend that keeps me on a straight arrow, and the friend that gives me that swift kick in the butt when I need it,
Yeah.
I'm good. But another thing that made me realize it's that once I removed situations that involved alcohol and chasing women, that's where they're like, "Oh, train, you're boring." Like, you know, right? Isn't it true? Like sex, money, and drugs, right? Once you remove that, isn't that how you can identify people quickly? What are your thoughts?
Oh my gosh, yeah, 100%. Like this is the thing, and I often like I've spoken a few times. I talk about like, look, it doesn't matter how old you are as a man. There's that sometimes there's that 16-year-old boy that's always in the background giving you some bad advice, and there's ego and there's posturing and there's like there's wanting to do things that your parents wouldn't approve of. And that's I always say I got to manage the adolescent boy in me. Like, like I'm up there in my years, but that never goes away. You just manage it, right? But to your point, yeah, like having friends from way back, from growing up, from childhood, that's loyalty, man. We have loyalty, and we want to be loyal to our oldest friends because they knew us when we couldn't kick a soccer ball very well, or we were learning to throw a football or whatever. Um, and so those are the hardest relationships to cut loose, though. you know don't you find, like, I've had friends, like I lost friends over COVID, for just like, for what having a discussion. We're just talking. Hey, I'm the same guy we shared a hoagie in the back seat at the 7-Eleven when we were really high. I'm that same guy. Like, what's going on? you know um but yeah, that's tough. I mean, it's a real conundrum, right? Like, where you draw the line, um, with your old friends, if they're not, if they're a really bad influence and they don't have your best interest at heart. How do you deal with that?
One of the ways I dealt with it is hmm, I'm going to phrase it this way to answer your question. I dealt with it by being first, I had to be comfortable with being alone because I knew that the journey was going to be one that I may have to take alone. That took some time and that delayed the whole process. So when I was able to be comfortable with my own thoughts and being able to go to a restaurant by myself and not caring what people think and watch a movie in the theaters alone too, that's when I said, okay, this is where I need to have the conversation. Because I was respectful enough that I actually had the conversation with some people. Some people understood, some people wanted to fight, some people weren't happy. Whatever the case is, I was prepared for the reaction because I at least knew the capabilities of some people when it came to their reaction. So when I did that, I also had to have a conversation with myself and say, Terrain, what is it that you like about yourself? What is it that you love about yourself? And what is it that you don't like? And that third question was the most difficult because I had to admit to myself that some of the situations that I found myself in, some of the people that I surrounded myself in, was my responsibility and my fault. And I think sometimes we struggle with saying that I have bad friends because I choose to have bad friends. I have people around me that may not be the best for me is because I'm allowing that. And once I was honest with myself, then there was no looking back because what are they really going to say that I haven't said to myself already, right?
Absolutely. That's really mature. Like, a lot of I think a lot of people um don't come to terms with that. And I'm sure that your success and your well-being um have a lot to do with that level of maturity that you had and have, um to see that. Like, it's pretty amazing, actually. It should be inspirational to your listeners to know that there is an out. If you're going down a path, there is a way out, but it's not easy. But you have to look in the mirror, and those three questions that you asked, perfect, perfect. And so, yeah, I mean, first of all, that's amazing. So I just want to say, like, have a lot of respect for that and that level of maturity. You know, we're adolescent boys most of the time, and like to be able to look past that is pretty impressive. So kudos to you, man.
Thank you. Thank you. I asked actually, on top of that, I asked someone this question when it came to changing their life around like that. I asked them, do you think that we need to hit rock bottom or a significant event to achieve the change? And that person gave an answer. I think we do. What are your thoughts on us needing that rock bottom significant canon event to trigger that change?
Well, I got to say, for me, that's exactly it. Like, I remember some movie. I don't remember what movie, but Danny DeVito said to somebody in a movie, "Rock bottom's a college education, kid," um, and that was me in 2022. You know, with two beautiful boys, and you know, dark place. Kids are the only thing that kept were keeping me alive, basically, um, and being able to provide for them. And yeah, I hit that, and I, you know, I fought my way out of it. But one would hope that it's not for everybody. You know, people can have that maturity. But what are your experiences on that?
I think we need it because if you look at, let's say, if you look at addiction, right? A lot of people who start seeking help from addiction because of addiction is that they've had that rock bottom moment. And everyone's rock bottom is different, right? Like mine is different than yours is different, ours is different from a number of people. But the reason why I say it's needed in general is that you can want something for your friend as badly as you want it, but if they're not ready for it, if they don't want it as well, they're not going to change, right? They're gonna have to change. And sometimes it goes back to that old saying, right? Those who don't hear will feel, right? So sometimes it will take you saying that, hey, you know what, Terrain, you should really change your life and find something successful. Like, okay, yeah, yeah, I'll start tomorrow. Then tomorrow turns into next week and the next month and so on. But if that same behavior now makes me lose my house, my car, and my ability to provide for myself, you damn well sure tomorrow I'm making some change,
Absolutely. Oh my
right?
God. Absolutely.
So I think that's why it's so needed because it also shows us our value. Because I think a lot of times for some people, there's the arrogance that it will never get so bad that I need to change. Right. But then when your fingers start tingling, your hands are feeling numb, you start having these health issues, you're like, oh, what my doctor and my friends told me 10 years ago I should have been doing now. So now I got to spend the rest of my life not preventing it, but I got to spend the rest of my life resolving it. How do you think our choices affect our value and how we see ourselves?
Oh man, what you talked about just now is so relevant and so important because you know we are sometimes moved guided by ego and our ego and dismissal of the health warnings, for example. um, it's like, I'll give you an example. So after my separation, I put on a lot of weight. I didn't want to date, I didn't want to do anything. I was like, I wrote, and I was just like I was not in a good health. My health was terrible. I was borderline diabetic, and all these warnings over the years. Yeah. Whatever, you know how the mind works: denial, dismissal, ego, and then one day I just thought, oh my God, I'm not going to see my kids graduate from high school or trade school or college or whatever. Um, and that was the moment when the doctor said, Mike, if you don't make a change now, you're probably going to be diabetic and then you're probably going to be dead. And then that those words, so that was my second rock bottom. But from a health perspective, but yeah, so if we don't take heed to these warnings, if we don't listen to the warnings, um, we put ourselves, you know, I'm I'm not a very religious man, but I'm a spiritual man. And we put our faith, we put ourselves in the hands of our maker, you know? And most of the time the maker's like, well, if you're not going to help yourself, have fun. Bye. See you on the other side. Because really, like, if we can't if we can't get past ourselves, then we're not going to get better.
The closet isn't only for clothes, it's for past trauma and everything that we don't want to see, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Such a good expression. Can I use that?
Of course, what's mine is yours.
that's that's very good. Uh, the closet is just, yeah, that's really good.
Yeah.
Really
Let
good.
me let me ask you then, do you then think that some of us are hiding from our emotions?
That's a good question. Um, I think as men, um, we certainly don't want to seem emotional and vulnerable. Um, so we do uh, hide from that. We're not afraid to show aggression or anger, or, you know, I got to tell you real quick, I had to do this anger management thing when I was going through my dark times. And, the thing I learned, the biggest takeaway was that everybody gets angry, but there's a difference between being aggressive angry or assertive angry. And that was the thing that resonated with me. But back to what you're saying, because, obviously I'm jumping around like I do, but back to what you're saying. I think I lost my train of thought. Could you ask the question again? I'm sorry, Terry.
Absolutely. Do you think that we're hiding from our emotions?
Yes, I think most of the time we do, and I think sometimes you need to watch Field of Dreams by yourself and cry at the end with nobody around watching, just to get rid of some of that.
You mentioned aggression. You mentioned that you had to go to anger management. I always felt that the emotions are a spectrum and each one has their own variety, right? And I always like to say that to people that I work with, that I coach, is that you're entitled to feel what you feel, and you're entitled to have it surface inside you as you desire. The question then is, what are you going to do with the emotions that you're feeling? How are you going to express them, right? Like you gave a fantastic point. You could be angry at something, right? Let's say you're angry that someone beat up an old woman. And because of that anger, you decided to make change in that community. And now all the grandparents are safer because of that. That's a positive expression, right? Another one could be like a former friend that I had is that when he gets angry, he jump kicks your car because he thinks he's Bruce Lee or Van Damme, right? Like,
That's weird, but it's funny. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
yeah, it is funny because to see a grown man leave both of his feet, kick a car, then fall flat on his back, it is hilarious, right? But then when you laugh at someone that's angry, it makes them angry because they think they're the Incredible Hulk, whereas they're not, right? Another one could be that someone is sees someone's success and then it inspires them, and because they experience jealousy, they may want to cause harm to that person, or if they experience envy, they would take from that person and claim it as their own, right? So these are examples where it can be unhealthy and it could be dangerous. And I think sometimes we don't realize the path that our emotions can take us until we experience strong versions of them. We touched on men, right? We touched on aggression and we touched on maybe some of the emotions that men can or cannot express just because of maybe their upbringing, maybe society or whatever. What are some of the dangers that you've seen when men are not able to be emotionally aware as maybe they should be in their lives?
Well, man, I think it's pretty common when men can't express, because that's when men get violent. Maybe they become abusive. Maybe they are, short tempered with their kids, impatient with their with their loved ones. Um, you know, if a man, I think, look, I'm not a psychologist or an economist. I don't play one on social media. Like, I'm just talking lived experience here, and and real world experience. But I think what happens is when a man cannot be whole, when a man cannot express, and I'm not talking about like, expressing extreme emotion. I'm talking about having an outlet, whether that outlet is, you go to martial arts class, and you're grappling with other people, or you run, or you ride your bike, or you have some sort of outlet. When you have that outlet, you're calmer. You release the pressure. It's like opening the steam valve, right? And so I do think men struggle. I think especially in positions of responsibility, of provision, and you know, we need to connect with ourselves. You you were smart enough and mature enough and aware enough to connect with yourself, and I'll bet you're a pretty chill guy. You do your thing. You do it successfully. You do it with care and compassion and thoughtfulness, which is awesome. And I think most people have the ability to be balanced. They just need to find it. And what you did by identifying what the challenges were, we all need to take a step back and pause and ask ourselves those questions. What's making me angry? What's keeping me frustrated? What am I afraid of?
What do you think are some of the obstacles that are facing men when it comes to understanding that?
I think, honestly, I think it's ego. I think it's ego, the lack of self-awareness. But I also think it's like, roles are pushed on on people, on all people. But specific roles are pushed on men. And sometimes they need guidance, you know, like, I love my dad. He died young. Um, but he didn't give me a whole lot of guidance. He just basically said, if you gamble, I'll kill you. That was basically it, you know. Um, but so I don't gamble. Um, and so, but I guess, sorry, I digress. But I think, you know, having that guidance, having that person, and I honestly think that a little bit of counseling, having somebody to talk to. When I started counseling, I just vented. I like, 30 minutes of like, man, and this pisses me off, and this and that and the other thing. And afterwards, I felt great. I was able to continue. So releasing that pressure, I think would help so many, but you got to be able to take a step back and recognize it.
That's something that I loved. Like when I was able to speak to someone about what I was going through and just let it all out. It was such a beautiful, beautiful feeling. Describe that feeling for those who are listening who maybe haven't experienced yet, but they're looking to have that person to speak to, a coach, mentor, therapist, whomever.
I think the one word that comes to mind is peace, you know, finding that peace because there's so much going on. And when you can release the stress and like the stresses of life aren't going away. Like there's no, everybody has it. But when you can release that tension, that's a peaceful place. That's a place where you can start to work on strategies out of situations. Like if you're not at peace, if you're always in that stress, that fight or flight mode, then you're not going to find solutions.
I absolutely agree. I think that one of the hardest things is that understanding what you need and finding people to provide it to you when you can provide it, I think that's a superpower and a skill. Do you see that lacking in today's world?
I can't speak too generally, but for myself, yeah, I wasn't able to express that. It took me a long time, man, into my 50s, uh, before I learned to express that, you know, and I just hope that others aren't as slow as I am. Um, that they can find that ability to just, but you have to ask yourself, right? You can't like you got to take that step back, just as you did, just as we've been talking about, being able to pause and reflect and ask yourself those hard questions. Because until you do that, nothing's changing.
What role then do you think maybe shame and guilt plays when it comes to asking ourselves a tough question so we could become a better person?
That's a hard one because um, I think like I think we all shame or guilt ourselves, right? But how we respond to our own criticisms, like I know somebody who um, does these really hard workouts every day, right? And he says every day I don't want to do it, and I have to fight with. I'm just gonna. I guess I'll. Can I say like words? Yeah. Okay. He says every morning I have to fight with my inner bitch to to make me do this workout because I know it's good for me, but I never want to do it. And he says every morning I have that argument with my inner bitch, and once in a while my inner bitch wins, but most of the time I'm able to overcome. So for some people it's motivation. Some people need to be kinder to themselves. I was really hard on myself, and I got to say, being too hard on myself didn't really help. Doing something made a difference, and for me it was writing those books.
The books that you've written, it seems like, Mike, that it's an outlet for the person that you are becoming and has helped you throughout your life. How much of yourself are in those books?
All of me, everything, every character, every good person, bad person, male, female, every person in the books are an extension of me. I put myself in the dialogue because I'm most of the stories are either loosely based on my experiences or me in situations that I'm trying to situations from my imagination. So being able to put myself in parts of myself in the stories were so um, liberating. Were so what's that word? Like I guess it would be liberating, but that's what it felt like. You know, the good, the bad, the uncomfortable, the the delusional, the brutally honest, the all of it. And to be able to do that honestly and sincerely and without any sort of judgment, without any sort of any sort of just I guess judgment is the key. Human beings in situations and navigating the world, and all my books have that. Just navigating through the pressures of life in different types of stories.
You mentioned you have two children, two sons. Is that
Yes,
correct?
yes.
Perfect. When you were starting out becoming the man that you are, and you mentioned that you had a relationship that unfortunately ended, but you had two children that you wanted to be a better person for. How important was it for you to be a role model, a better man, a better father, a better example, a person of conscience like you are now? How important was it for you to become the man today to help your two sons see a better version of yourself?
Oh man, it's the most important thing. I wasn't always present, you know, in the early years. I wasn't always, I don't think I was always a good father. I was that performed man. I was that disconnected. person. And now I I'm so much more present. And it's so important. Like people, everyone, not just kids, everyone needs positivity in their lives. Everybody needs somebody who's rooting for them, somebody who's always got their back, someone who's always going to be their cheerleader. I tell my son even when he has a terrible game, like I'm your biggest fan. You know, so I can tell you that you sucked tonight, but you'll get better. Um, like everyone, and sometimes it takes just one person in a child's life to be there and be supportive of them to make a big difference. And I've been trying to make a difference in my kids' lives now. So I get a little emotional when I talk about this stuff, but it's so important to try to set that example, you know, values, morals, being a good person, you know, all of the things that, we strive to be to make our world a better place.
What's a memory that you like to share of your children when they saw you becoming the man that you are today?
Oh wow. Um, I don't know how it fully relates, but it is a kind of funny story if I can share. So when I was a kid, I played baseball. I was a baseball player. I was a chubby kid, and so I just happened to be good at it. So my son wanted to play hockey. My son plays hockey, but I wanted him to play baseball, and I finally convinced him to play baseball, and he played well. And in his second season, he won Player of the Year. The kid's got his mother's athleticism, um, not mine. But anyway, um, so we're at the banquet. He receives the trophy for Player of the Year. It was Adam or something like that. I don't know if that's 9 or 10 years old. And and I'm always really supportive, and I was always like, you're doing great, helping him out. And I guess I'm realizing now that this has nothing to do with your question, but so we're in the car, we're going home, and I said, buddy, Player of the Year, that's awesome. Like, how do you feel? He just kind of, from the back seat, I saw him in the mirror. He said, Dad, this is nice, but I don't want to play baseball. I want to play hockey. And he retired from baseball. And that broke my heart. But I didn't show it. I was respectful of that. I know I didn't answer your question, but I've been dying to tell that story for years. So thank you so much for indulging me.
You actually did, because that's a perfect memory, because it shows, at least to me, that you could have been that person and said that, no, you're going to be playing this. But because you're a different person now, you're saying that, okay, let's do what you love because I'm doing what I love. And what I love is being around the two of you and making sure that you both are okay, right?
Absolutely. You know what? Thanks for tying that up because that's absolutely it is. You know, it's hard. Um, yeah, when they don't want to do what you want them to do, but yeah, it's just let them grow. But actually, I'm grateful. Thanks for sort of putting that together and making that connection because I was feeling pretty embarrassed for a second. So you saved
Let me,
me.
there you go. Let me ask you this. So there's one thing that came up is that when, actually, let me ask you this way. When when you're trying your best, right? And you mentioned that you weren't always a good father, but you mentioned that you tried, and then along the way you started to learn, and you started to grow, and you could appreciate it. Um, did you have fun with your children as you're becoming the type of person that you are today?
Absolutely, that's 100%. Like, you know, things all of a sudden did not become a chore. You know, oh, got to go to the park. Oh, got to do this. Oh, got to do that. Oh, shoot, I have to wake up early for this. When it stopped being a chore, that was the big breakthrough. Like, and that's about being present, right? That's about enjoying the moment. That's not about rushing them around. to do things. That's about sharing it with them. And I got to tell you now, I think I like going to the rink more than my son does. I freaking love going to the rink. I go to his practices. I go to his games. I'm there with him. And sometimes like, Dad, do you have to like hang around the practice? I'm like, yeah, I like watching you play. Um, and so like finding that joy, and I've connected with my son on like he's more of a computer kid. He does like 3D printing, and I'm with him in the process. Like I'm not just okay, clean up your mess. I'm with him helping to clean up. We use a resin printer. So there's a process. And so I'm engaged in that. And I gotta say, like, not only does it make me a better person, it shows them that I care. And that's the most important thing because that's what we remember. How did our parents make us feel? Right. And if our parents made us feel good, then that's a great step for our self-esteem.
Since you're sharing an experience with your children from a father's perspective, I can share one from a child's perspective of both of my parents. I played football, baseball, and volleyball. Um, in my early years, up until high school, as well as in college, and I even played for some city leagues for a little bit. Baseball and football, not so much volleyball. The team that I was on for baseball, we did really well, and I was pretty good. Not good enough to. I'm not saying would have been MLB, right? But I did well, and we're winning games, and my mother, my father didn't come to one single game. And in the beginning, it bothered me. But then what I learned was that the coach became that father, mother figure at that time for me. Then seeing all the other parents and how enthusiastic. Sure, you have the crazy ones. We know the sports parents, right? Who are projecting. They're like, you're going to be great because I wasn't that great, but you have to be because you have to breathe that
Right.
legacy. There are those as well, right? We ignore
Absolutely.
those. But the ones who are healthy, who are controlled,
Yeah.
it was a beautiful sign. We're in the championship game, and my mother and my father came to that game. I had the worst game ever.
Oh, oh, oh,
Right? We got blown out
oh
out
no.
of that game, right? And what was interesting about it from my perspective is that a few things. One, I was uncomfortable actually having my mother and father there, oddly enough, looking back. Two, I had all these trophies from sports. And that was the one that probably hurt the most because at the time, I thought that if they weren't there, would I have played better and could that have helped the team? But I couldn't put that on my mother or my father because ultimately the performance laid with me.
Sure.
Was it uneasy having them there? Absolutely. But I share that because even though you wanted initially your child to play a different sport, you still showed up.
Yeah.
Whereas some parents, um, is just not something that's on their radar. Sure, their child is doing well, but they're not maybe able to make the time for whatever the reason. So I just want to tie that in further because I think sometimes we are hard on ourselves because we think that showing up isn't good enough, where showing up is definitely good enough, and it shows that some people would appreciate it as well.
It's it's funny that you asked the question, would I have played better if they weren't there? Because you were so used to not performing for your parents, right? Like, no, I mean, it's a good question because, I played baseball as well when I was younger. And my parents never came out to see me play. I certainly wasn't, we never got to championships or anything like that. But I remember it affected me. Like, I don't think I ever said anything, but we carry that. Like you carry that memory. You're a grown man, you're a successful man, and you still carry that. And it's sometimes those pieces of adversity, you know, cause us to do the same things, and sometimes those pieces of adversity change us. Like for me, like every freaking event I'm going to be at, you know, like I did school plays. I did, my parents didn't show up, you know, I did like a lot of things. But you know what? At the end of the day, if we can right a wrong, then we've we've come out of it to a certain degree, I think.
Let me ask you one final question, Mike, before I let you go. This question, I want to give you three wishes. You can wish for anything but more money for these
Oh,
wishes, okay?
come on.
What are three things you wish people knew, let's say young adults, men and women, about the importance of maybe breaking generational trauma and why?
That's a really tough question. Could you repeat the question?
Absolutely. So, what are three things you wish people knew? Let's say young adults, men and women, right?
Okay.
What are three things you wish men and women, young adults, knew about the importance of breaking generational trauma, such as not showing up for sports games, not being supportive of their children, and why?
I think that like the first thing that pops into my head is that if we don't break these cycles, then they're going to be perpetuated for generations. Like the cycle has to stop with someone. So recognize it, and I mean, it's easy to say, but break the cycle, you know, because man, like if you're a young person, you don't want to impose the same trauma on your kids. Be aware of that, you know. But yeah, it's a really good question. I'm sorry I don't have a better answer, Terrain, but I just think breaking the cycle, that's what comes to my mind, like the importance of it and getting help if you need